Hello, I'm Wesley the Hobby Hermit, and today we have a new video exploring the new GW contrast paints. Now, I have no experience utilizing GW contrast paints, not even the old ones. So, this will be a totally new experience for me, and everyone seems pretty hyped about these, so I was pretty excited to try them out and see if they have a place in my process, and maybe I've just been missing out this whole time. Now, I'm only going to be using 7 contrast paints today. They're a little pricey, and I don't really think it's necessary to buy all of them based on from what I've read online. So I'm only going to be using 7 that I've picked out to seem to be the most useful. So I'm only using those 7 contrast paints, and surprisingly, the title of this video is a little misleading in that I'm actually going to be using 2 other non-contrast paints just so that I can test out the full capabilities of these contrast paints. I'm going to be using the Plate Mail Metallic from Army Painter because I want to test the contrast paints over a metallic and see what type of effect that creates. And I'm also using Pro Curls White to mix with the contrast paints to see what type of effects we get for blending and those types of things. So today's all about trying to push contrast paints to the limit and seeing how they can be utilized in as many different ways as possible and trying to find a place for them in my current painting process. And I hope that this will be beneficial for you as well if you have limited experience with contrast paints. So I really wanted to experiment with these contrast paints as much as possible. The first thing I did was paint straight Sigvold Burgundy over white primer, and it gave a great effect of darkness in the shadows and light at the edges, kind of what you think when you traditionally hear about contrast paints. It was a little more purple than I wanted for this paint job, but I knew I could fix it later, and it gave such a great, rich, and saturated base coat that I was pretty pleased with it overall. Like I said, I wanted to try and experiment as much as possible, so my next kind of step was putting metallics over all of the armor pieces. So I used Army Painter's Plate Mail Metal before putting a thin down layer of the Rattling Grime contrast paints all over it. Now, I am really glad I limited myself to such a limited range of paints, and specifically the contrast paints in this scenario, because it really forced me to utilize them in a lot of different and creative ways. The Rattling Grime, when thinned down, acted like a much more pigmented known oil, and even though it took a bit of work to get it worked into all the little crevices of the armor, I'm pretty happy with this dark, brassy effect I ended up getting on the armor, and it kind of accomplished what I was hoping it would when I put the contrast paints over the metallic paints. Another thing I really enjoyed about using the contrast paints in a creative way was kind of creating a glaze-like consistency with it. I was able to kind of tone down that purplish nature of the burgundy paint by taking the Bale Red and thinning it down to a glaze consistency and putting it over top to kind of bring down that purpleness and add a little bit more red, which is what I was wanting. I'll say one thing that really surprised me about this paint set is the versatility that I could utilize the paints in. They went on straight out of the pot in a really cool, high contrast, highly saturated way that really made the miniature pop, made a really cool base layer, something for you to play around with a lot. But then I also was able to water it down and really use it as a cool glaze or kind of a wash in a lot of scenarios. So I was really impressed with how versatile the paint was and how I could mix and blend it with other contrast paints, with water, with other acrylic paints, and just see all the different effects you could get out of it. And I just was really impressed with the results I got out of it and how well the paint held up. I didn't feel like it was getting too thin or too thick or starting to like gum up or anything like that. It was extremely smooth through every single kind of process I put it through. So the versatility of it, I was really impressed, and it made this whole paint job a lot easier since I was limiting myself to just these contrast paints. So the glowing effect on the hammer was something that actually took 2 different tries. I initially just put on the metallic paint that I previously used, and then just put a thinned down striking scorpion green over top. And it didn't really feel glowy or anything like that, not really accomplishing the effect I wanted. So I took my thinned down Rattling Grime that I put over the armor, and then I put this over all of the hammer to try and give a known oil effect, trying to give some grittiness into the hammer and not so shiny and clean. And then I just took straight scorpion green out of the pot and put it on the hammer and tried to recreate my glow effect again. And overall, I think this looked much better. It was a lot more brighter and gave that glowing effect more. I then took a bit of the Pro Acryl White and mixed it with the striking Scorpion Green, and was able to kind of put some very bright edges on there to kind of enhance that glowing effect and really push it farther. I haven't really messed a lot with glowing effects, so this was a bit of a test for me, but overall I think it looked really good, and I knew I wanted to add some green into this paint job to contrast with the red skin without it becoming a Christmas miniature, and I think the glowing hammer really accomplished that for me. I will say that this whole process has really helped me tackle my fear of going too bright in miniatures. I tend to keep very grim, dark, very low saturated tones, and these paints are very not that, and so it really forced me kind of out of my comfort zone and to really just put a lot of punch of color into this miniature. With the skin and the hammer and the little gems on it and the cloak, it really forced me to put in bright colors. They're very highly saturated paints, so it really made me paint a lot brighter than maybe I'm used to, and I'm actually really happy it did, because I think the end result is really good, and I think it's something I'm definitely going to be including more in future paint jobs, because I really love how highly saturated and how bright these colors are. The last thing I want to touch on regarding these GW contrast paints is the brown Garagax Sewer. When I put this over a base coat of white, it gives probably hands down one of the easiest leather-like effects I've ever seen. I was blown away by it. And moving forward, this is going to be one of my go-to methods for painting leather. And if you're painting a mass amount of miniatures that have leather pants or leather belts and pouches and stuff, this would be one of my go-to things, to have a one-coat solution to painting leather on those miniatures. Just base coat it white, put this over top, and you get a super simple, super easy, and awesome looking leather effect. This was probably one of the most unexpected standouts for me out of the contrast paints that I utilized. Overall, I'm super happy I did this exercise of only utilizing these contrast paints. It really forced me to be creative and to really problem solve with my paints through blending and trying to make my own washes and my own glazes. I think it really forced me to become a better painter, because I had limited myself so much. It also really made me get creative with my color choices and my blending of different colors to see what I could get out of it, and mixing it with the Pro Acryl White just made everything a lot brighter. And I think overall I'm really happy with the effects that came out of this, and I'm extremely happy that I did this exercise and finally jumped into using contrast paints, because I never used them before, and who knows, maybe I should have been doing this all along. Maybe my paint jobs would be so much better. Maybe contrast paints are the only thing I'm missing. Okay, maybe not that crazy good, but I really enjoy how highly saturated the colors are in these paints, and I'm definitely excited to use them in future projects to really bring more color and more vibrance to my miniatures. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you watching and sticking around. If you want to support the channel, you can always just like and subscribe. It's the biggest help overall. If you want to support in another way, you can check out my Etsy shop where I sell 3D printed miniatures. You can even pick up the miniature I sold today, a fiendish warrior from Artisan Guild. I'll include all the links down in the description. I appreciate you so much for watching, and don't forget to elevate your game night.